August sucks because there is literally no sports news, and because of that and the fact I need to upload, I know it's a bit early, but here is my prediction for the Leafs 2019-2020 lineup. Just a quick disclaimer, this is not what I think the opening night lineup is going to be. This is more of a, once the players who are injured, such as Hyman and Dermott, come back, what the Leafs' top roster this year will be. Also, we're assuming Marner signs because it's no fun if we don't do that. So this is what the peak potential of the Leafs roster this season will look like, not what the starting day lineup with the injuries, and fingers crossed that this doesn't happen, but potentially a Marner holdout would lead to. This is the full top strength roster and lineup that the Leafs can have. So to start things off, the top line. Tavares, Marner, Hyman. Obvious choice. They were an absolutely fantastic line last year. All three had career years, and honestly, it would be stupid to split them up. This one is a no-brainer. Hyman will start the season injured, and in that slot, I could easily see a Janssen or a Medeyev, I still don't know how to pronounce his name, slotting in. But for right now, this, I think, is the no-brainer top line for the Leafs. Now, moving on to the second line, or the 1B line, because this team, let's be fully honest, has two top lines. Matthews, Nylander, and Janssen. Now, Matthews and Nylander, after playing the first 2 years of their careers together and being so good together, just did not play together barely at all last season, and both of them seemed to kind of struggle due to it. So I think putting Matthews and Nylander together is the right move for the Leafs this year, to get Nylander back on pace and to give Matthews a real guy who can be an elite setup man for him and his just fantastic shot. And Andreas Janssen, small player, showed a ton of skill last season, scored 20 goals. On this line, if he plays the entire season with Matthews and Nylander, scoring 60 points is very much possible for him. He has the tools to do it, and he has the tools to excel playing on a line with two elite players like Matthews and Nylander. Moving on to the third line, Alexander Kerfoot centering Trevor Moore and Kasperi Kapanen. Now, I'm going to be fully honest, this is a bit of a downgrade from the third lines the Leafs have had in the past couple of years, and we had Bozak, Van Riemsdyk, and Connor Brown on it 2 years ago, and then last year when we had Kadri centering, I guess it was Nylander and Marleau for a bit at the time, but Kerfoot, Kapanen, Trevor Moore, all very solid players to probably put up 40 points. This whole line was probably a 20-goal, 40-point contingent, and for a third line, that is absolutely incredible in the NHL if you can get all three players to score at about that clip. Kapanen was fantastic last season. You could see him very easily moving up the lineup, and Trevor Moore honestly could be anywhere in the bottom nine. You could also put Mikheyev on this line, depending on how he does to start the season, how he plays in training camp, and just how much Babcock likes him. But all in all, this would be an incredibly solid third line. But one thing the Leafs have is just a ton of flexibility at the third line, because Kerfoot could play on the wing or at center. There's a possibility that you could play Kerfoot up in the top six as a winger and move Nylander down to the third line center. I personally really liked Nylander at center when he covered in that third line slot for Kadri in the playoffs last year. I know a lot of people haven't really liked Nylander the past year, but I think when he's played center, he's just had a control over the game, and you can see that like the goals and the points are all coming for him there. And I think if Nylander had a real shot to be this team's third line center, he could probably excel in it. It would take a bit of a learning curve, but he would probably be able to do it. But for right now, and with the Leafs, I think trying to put out the best team that they could possibly put out as quickly as possible, putting Kerfoot at center, someone who's more experienced in that role, makes more sense, and putting Nylander with Matthews on the wing, again, just putting those two back together who've had so much success together at the NHL level is a no-brainer. And now for the fourth line. The fourth line is an incredibly difficult one to gauge because the Leafs have just signed so many depth pieces this year that it could be literally anyone. So this is my best guess of what's going to happen. But basically this Leafs fourth line could change every night to better match it up against the opposition that they're going against. And I think that the fourth line for sure is going to have Ilya Mikheyev on it and Jason Spezza, just because these are two players that it seems Babcock really likes. Spezza, of course, old veteran, and there's no way Jason Spezza is not a regular on this Leafs team. Ilya Mikheyev, we've heard a lot that the Leafs are expecting him to slot into the fourth line, and he was a pretty decent scorer in the KHL last season. So I do think that Mikheyev probably will make this team at least earlier in the season, and if he performs well, will probably stick. But for the third spot on this fourth line, I honestly have no idea. I want it to be Nick Petan. I feel like Nick Petan has the potential to be a very good depth player for the Leafs, but a part of me feels like Babcock won't play him, and that like possibly Pontus Aberg will get a really good shot at that role. Also, you can't forget about Kenny Agostino, who I've heard has one of the best shots of all those depth wingers the Leafs signed in the summer to make that spot. So honestly, that fourth line right wing slot could go to absolutely anybody, because the Leafs just signed so many wingers this year, and it probably isn't going to go to just solely one guy. It's probably going to be this whole fourth line, Mikheyev, Petan, Aberg, Agostino. There's probably just going to be a rotation of wingers on this fourth line until possibly late in the season, the playoffs, where they pick the two guys that were the best, or the two guys that were the best to match up against the team that they're going up against, and we'll see who sticks. Now, moving on to the defense. The top pairing, I think, is going to be Morgan Rielly and Cody Ceci. Morgan Rielly really just came into his own last season. He became a Norris candidate defenseman, and I think finished 5th in Norris voting. And like, he deserves it. He's definitely a top 5 defender in the NHL right now. First pairing defenseman all the way. And because of that, I'm not putting Tyson Barrie with him on the top line, because I think him and Barrie play too similar of a style, and Morgan Rielly is more than good enough to make up for whatever shortcomings Cody Ceci has. That being said, Cody Ceci is still a pretty solid NHL defender. Not a top pairing defender, but you're not going to waste Tyson Barrie by putting him with a player who plays basically the same style of game. You can't have two defenders that basically their game revolves around carrying the puck up the ice so much, playing together. That would just be a waste of one of their talents basically every time you have a rush. So Rielly and Barrie are going to be split up. Because of that, I think Rielly and Ceci are going to be the top pairing. In the end, they're probably going to have Rielly, Muzzin, and Barrie all getting very high ice time, and Ceci's probably going to get a bit less, but because we need to have specific pairings, and because I don't think putting Morgan Rielly on the second pairing it does any sort of justice to him, I'm going to say the top pairing will be Rielly and Ceci. And for my second pairing, I'm going to have Muzzin and Barrie. This may be the best defensive pairing the Leafs have had in my lifetime. Two incredibly talented defenders, both definitely top 20, maybe even top 15 in the NHL, and both on incredibly cap-friendly deals for the Leafs. And just the ability that these two players will have to play together, just Barrie with his puck moving ability, Muzzin also a great puck moving but also a bigger body, they're just going to be so good, so dominant offensively, or they should be for the Leafs. And I'm very, very excited to see what this pairing can do, because that is just, again, probably the greatest pairing the Leafs have had in my lifetime. And I've not been more excited for a defensive pairing ever than I have been for the possibility of having Jake Muzzin and Tyson Barrie playing together for the Leafs. And on the third pairing, I think we're going to have Travis Dermott and Jordan Schmaltz. Now, until Dermott gets back from injury, the Leafs' third pairing is incredibly weak. But once he does come back, this defensive group looks pretty darn good. The only real issue is that 6th defender spot, the bottom pairing right D. Jordan Schmaltz, he could sit there and not play that much a game, but really, that position could go to anyone. They could play a left shot D there, a Martin Marincin, or a Ben Hart. I hate all of these options. The Leafs really do not have 6 NHL caliber defensemen, unless one of my thoughts is Rasmus Sandin, although he's a left shot defenseman, so it doesn't make as much sense, or possibly Timothy Liljegren becomes ready and takes that final slot in the defense, playing maybe minimal minutes. But then you worry about those young players' development if they're not playing more than 18 minutes a game. So I think that the Leafs will probably play a Jordan Schmaltz there. We'll give Liljegren and Sandin another year in the Marlies to develop a bit more. One or both of those two players will be in the lineup for the 2020-2021 season. I guarantee it. But I don't know if they're going to make the team as the sixth defender right now, especially because I feel like for the development, it would make more sense to have them play top minutes in the AHL than maybe like 12 to 14 minutes a game in the NHL. You know, maybe they get a couple games up, get a taste of it at the beginning of the season to see if like Liljegren can stick, and if he can, then that's fantastic. But for right now, I think Jordan Schmaltz takes it. And in net, we have a very obvious choice for starter, Freddie Anderson. Been carrying the Leafs in net for the past 3 years. The issue is what happens behind him. Because if there's one thing that people have been talking about when it comes to Freddie this season, it's that the Leafs need to have better load management for him. And they have gone out and not gotten any sort of backup. We trade away Garrett Sparks, so right now our backup is Michael Hutchinson, who is not really a fantastic option for backup. Although we do have Nuvrith on a tryout, he could potentially be a decent backup, but he hasn't been good in the NHL for like 6 years. So I honestly have no idea what this slot is going to be. Right now, I'm going to say it's Nuvrith. But if you think for a second that Kyle Dubas is going to look at that final backup goalie spot and think that's good enough and not do anything about it, I think you are gravely mistaken. I think Dubas probably will make some sort of move to get a better backup in there. I mean, the fact is there are so many goalies in the NHL that are like fringe, can be a backup, but maybe not goalies. And like eventually some of them do stick. So maybe Nuvrith, this is his redemption. Maybe Hutchinson gets a shot and sticks. Maybe Kazimir Kaskis, though, can become a solid NHL goaltender. Maybe the Leafs trade for someone completely new and he becomes fantastic for them. Who knows? But all I know is that if there's any position that has the biggest question mark beside it for this team right now, it's 100% the backup goalie slot. So yeah, this is what I think the lineup will be for the Leafs for the 2019-2020 season. It looks pretty damn good. However, yes, Dermott's injured to start the season, Hyman's injured to start the season, Marner still hasn't signed, but once all of that falls into place, this is what we get. And it's a pretty damn good roster. And also, Gardiner? Defense? That would solve all our issues. I mean, we're probably not going to have the money for him once Marner signs, but like, the fact that Gardner still isn't signed is very suspicious to me. And I think that, you know, maybe he could come back. But anyways, that does it for this video. If you liked it, hit like. If you want to see more of my stuff, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter. The link is down below in the description. And I'll see you next time.